This is the fourth in a series of 6 webinars that we're doing on the development of good learning repertoires. This webinar is hosted by CARD, Florida Atlantic University Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, PEPSA, Partnership for Effective Programs for Students with Autism. FAU Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, CARD, provides expert consulting, training, and support at no charge for all people across all race, ethnic, and gender groups with autism and related disabilities, their families, employers, the professionals, and community and governmental agencies serving them. FAU CARD provides support and assistance with the goal of optimizing the potential of all people across all race, ethnic, and gender groups with autism and related disabilities. CARD serves 5 counties: Indian River, St. Lucie, Martin, Okeechobee, Palm Beach, out of 3 offices in Boca Raton, Jupiter, and Port St. Lucie, and they provide 1 dynamic service. Services, again, are offered at no charge, including things like family and school consultations, trainings and workshops, public education, referrals and resources, adult hangout groups, and much more. Okay, today, we're talking about addressing specific sore spots for ages 6 to 11. Sometimes in some of my writings, I'll refer to these as turnoffs or just basically things that learners might not appreciate. And to be fair, there are plenty of things that all of us tend to not appreciate, right? Such as delays in anything moving forward, getting stuck at a red light. We do not appreciate being stuck behind a train or at a red light, or having someone say, no, that part is not available. So we're not looking for perfect, flexible Zen learners 100% of the time, but we are looking at some common sore spots that have some treatments that we can do, some interventions that we can make that help to make them less problematic, right? So they're not debilitating sore spots. What we don't want is when we're stuck at a red light, we might even curse, hopefully to ourselves, but we probably don't run the red light or flip somebody off or do other things that could actually create some trouble for us or for others. And some of our kids might do things analogous to that. They might, when encountering a delay in the delivery of a reinforcer, they might hit themselves in the head, right? Sometimes we're dealing with those kinds of issues. So it is worth us considering how we can lessen those problems. Based upon our first 3 parts of the series, hopefully your students have already begun making some significant progress in the development of what I'm calling the basic learner package. I'm going through this relatively quickly. This includes things like recognition that teachers sometimes control access to reinforcers, social approaches, attention as a reinforcer, meaning you like to have someone's attention, accepting prompts, accepting instruction, cooperating with teachers, manding, which is a fancy word for requesting, remaining in an area. Today, we'll talk a little bit more about the endurance part, because that's a little bit more on point with what we're hitting, and requests for attention. You likely still have work to do on some of those, right? So these aren't the kind of things, all those parts of the basic learner package, accepting of prompts and cooperating with teachers, those aren't the kind of things that work the same as reading does. I've taught you to read these words, right? And it's not just memorization of 4 sight words. You can read 1st grade level prose. You're not going to unlearn how to read 1st grade level prose. You know that now, you've got that now, good. But you can, quote unquote, unlearn how to be cooperative, right? How would that happen? If we taught cooperation by very generously providing lots of reinforcement and really timely prompts with really easy things, and then subsequently we used way less reinforcement with much harder things and much less supports for a long time relative to what your learner can stand, then we might lose that cooperation that we earned. So this is something to be earned in the first place and then maintained by maintaining a balance of our supports and payoff and effort involved by our children. Most student-teacher relationships beyond that, the basic math of how much effort are we requiring from our student and how much is that working out for him. Beyond that, most student-teacher relationships are also challenged by specific sore spots. Learners tend to dislike things like delay in reinforcer delivery, right? I want the candy and I don't want it later, I want it now. Or it's iPad or whatever it is, I want to get out the door. Very few people like to hear the word no, right? And very few of us like to be corrected. Our learners are the same. Learners sometimes dislike things like a slow pace of instruction. I'd like you to find the wagon. Okay, that's fine. You found the wagon. Let me take my data point. Let me change up the array. Let me, plan the next reinforcer, something like that. Let me position you in your seat. Most of your students would rather have you just get on with it, get to the next one. Some students dislike prompting, and they might dislike one kind of prompt more than another. And then there's a variety of idiosyncratic phenomena or like special things that different kids might not like. I didn't include on here, I have had one learner that was phobic of Joanne fabrics, which is a true story. And I bring it up because it's pretty unique. He's probably the only person in his state afraid of Joanne fabrics. But it's a good example. Plenty of our kids are dislike things like balloons or clapping. Confusing emotions on people's faces, enthusiastic smiles and laughs can be confusing for some of our kids and discomforting for them. Singing, some kids dislike. So we don't get to say, oh, you want to make things fun, sing, because some kids dislike when you sing. You're not making things fun, you're making things worse. So how does that help us when in our last webinar, we were talking about group responding and we said, if you want some group stuff, get some songs going because your kids can all do it at the same time and they're going to tend to like it. That's only true if they don't dislike singing. All this is individualized, right? And you can read the rest of those on your own. I want to dive a little bit more deeply into tolerance of delays in reinforcer delivery. Right, so I covered this a little, got ahead of myself. Raise your hand if you like experiencing delays in reinforcer delivery. This is also my chance for the wisecrack that, of course, there is no live audience today to raise your hands. You would have all raised your hands, I think, if you weren't shy on this one. So what kinds of things make this worse? What's an easier time to accept a delay and a harder time to accept a delay? If our motivation is really, really, really high, let's say we are at an outdoor event and we really, really, really have to go to the bathroom and there's a couple of outhouses available and there's lines for the outhouses. That's a bad time to be having to wait. In that case, having the chance to void is the reinforcer. Longer wait times are worse than shorter. That's a duh statement. Ambiguous wait times. So when you have a slow internet connection, these are adult examples work on these as well, don't they? For your own empathy here. If we have a slow internet connection, we're trying to open a site that we need to get to and it scrolls. We don't know, is it going to scroll for like 3 seconds? Is it going to scroll for 35 seconds? Sometimes it scrolls for like a minute and then past that point, it just eventually says, sorry, we can't do it. So we don't know. And the fact that we don't know makes it that much worse. Another issue is lack of other things to do while waiting. In general, it is fair for us to have things to do when we're waiting. If we were waiting in line at the store, another nice adult example, we expect to wait in the line at the store most of the time. But we have our phones. Almost all of us have some kind of phone that we can check texts and emails and things on while we're waiting. So we're not just standing there staring at the back of the person in front of us. I don't think I've introduced you to dimensions grids yet, or if I have, it's been very introductory. A dimensions grid is something that I've created just as a relatively easy tool to lay out some of the things that make a target either easier or harder. So is waiting going to be easier to do or harder to do? And we use these to make plans to help our student get enough success with a target. Take someone who is really new to waiting and who has really significant problem behaviors when there are short delays in getting a reinforcer. If it takes us 3 seconds to open a soda for them, they might be hitting or they might be on the floor. So in that case, we want to find a way to get a foot in the door. How do we get some success started? Here's a pared down example of what a dimensions grid would look like for tolerating delays. It's easier when there's shorter times, harder when there's longer times. Easier, usually easier, when there's modest interest in an item or activity, and it's usually harder when there's enormous interest in that item or activity. It's usually easier when there's clear feedback for good weighting, such as someone saying, yeah, okay, that's good. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, you're weighting nicely. Good job. I like how you're weighting. It's coming soon. As opposed to there's minimal or there's no feedback for good weighting. It's also easier when there are clear expectations about how long the wait time will be than when there's ambiguous expectations. For us, if we're binge watching a series on Netflix, the last episode ends and then it says the new one is starting in 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. Not only is it not a long time to wait, but I can also see exactly how long it is. And so great, I can handle that versus the scrolling with a bad internet connection. Let me go back a little bit to that previous slide and talk a little bit more about it. Okay, so what I want to add here is take our kid who I said he might throw himself to the floor if it takes us 3 seconds to get a soda open for him that he's asked for. Okay, so that's a problem with the tolerance of the delay. How can we try to get a foot in the door with him? One of the things I would look at is, are there things that he wants, but he's not as desperate about them as he is about the soda? So maybe he also likes pretzels, but they're not as critical as soda is. Or ideally, he'd like some things like a bounce on the ball with us or something like that if he's an appropriate age for us to be doing that kind of thing with him. In which case, we'll have less passionate interest, so a better chance for some tolerance. I might also add, because the behavior is rather severe when he's not doing well, I might also add really clear feedback and really clear expectations about the length of the wait time. Okay, you ready for the pretzel? Okay, good. Just wait. 1, 2, 3. Great. That's good waiting. Here's your pretzel. Note also with the pretzel versus the soda, it's easy to have a pretzel ready to go, so we can deliver it in 1 or 2 seconds than it is with an unopened can of soda. You open that, get the cup, pour it in there. Presumably, we're not giving him a whole can of soda. Or if we want to just dive in a little more deeply, we can already have the soda can open and we can work on demands and we can have a Dixie cup to give him, 2 or 3 swallows of soda at a time. So we can get demand, we can count to 2 or we can count to 4 and he can get the soda and we can get some successes started. Okay. Now, is this our end point? No, that's not our end point. That's our foot in the door point, right? We can use the dimensions grid to get our foot in the door so that we have more successes than failures. We can get some instruction through failure. I know it's a weird thing to say. There is some benefit to some degree of failure, but we need mostly successes, right? That remains true. Most of our instruction, the benefit comes from the successes. So if our guy was throwing himself to the floor 80% of the time, and we don't want to coax him up or reinforce that, and it wasn't successful waiting, even if we did coax him up and give him soda, then us finding a way to contrive this universe where we had short, clear wait times with immediate feedback and modest interest and all that, that puts us up to where, hey, we have a trend. Now most of the waiting opportunities are actually successful. So we're beginning to build the waiting muscle a little bit. That's good. How do we eventually move that forward? Well, eventually, say, I know now that you can wait 4 seconds, and you can wait 4 seconds, and you're getting soda if you wait 4 seconds, and you're not getting soda if you don't wait 4 seconds, right? At some level, with mostly successes, we've created mostly successes, but allowed some failures. All of those things now because of our history over the course of maybe days or maybe hours, maybe weeks. Now you have this history where you understand what waiting is. You don't have to be able to describe it, but you can understand if I wait well for 4 seconds, I get soda. If I don't wait well for 4 seconds, I don't. Great. An easy thing to do now is to go to 8 seconds, go to 12, 15 seconds. This can still be with us counting. Okay, so we're still giving clear feedback. Another thing we can do is we can go to more ambiguous expectations about the length of the wait time. So we might not count, but maintain sort of a shorter time. So here we're using the dimensions grid to counterbalance some easier sides of it, of the grid, so that we're still getting a good percentage of success, enough so that our student remains invested, because success breeds success. But we're still moving it forward by taking on some of the harder dimensions of the grid. So now it's, okay, sure, yeah, I'll get you some soda in a little bit. And then I look around a little bit and I find the soda and I find the cup, and I kind of take my time doing it. But what I'm not doing is counting out loud for him. And here I'm still only taking, let's say, about 4 or 5 seconds, instead of taking those 10, 12, or 15 seconds that I would be doing when I'm actually counting for him. Along the way, just to give you a couple of, I guess, parameters, numbers that I shoot for with it. For our 6 to 11 age range, if as possible, I want to build them up to waiting well without necessarily having anything else given for them to do for about a minute. And I want that to be not with us counting, because counting isn't helpful in the real world for mom and dad when they're on the phone, right? If you're on the phone and your kid wants something from you and you can't help them right now, and it might be a minute, it doesn't help you to be counting to 60 for your kid while you're also conversing on the phone, right? So that's a good example of how it wouldn't be a logical support to have in place. But by this time, once I get over 15 or 20 seconds in my delay, I'm using usually a digital timer, maybe on my phone, to show how long there is to wait. So you still have something to watch, you're still fine, you know how long it's going to be. I hold myself accountable, by the way, no matter what's going on. If I am on the phone and the timer is set for 30 seconds, when it beeps, you do have my attention and you do get what you need. I need to be really honest. You need to be able to trust me. I'm not, put another way, I'm not taking advantage of these things to distract you, to slow you down, so that you're not coming at me to get things so that I can try to extend them out, right? If I do that, I'm breaking your trust, and I deserve you to be impatient with me. When we get up over a minute or so in terms of how long our kids are needing to wait, past that point, then it really becomes much more relevant for them to have another thing to do in the meantime. Oh, it's going to be a minute or two. Here's a book, here's a fidget, here's some other stuff you can play with if you like in the meantime. Okay, tolerance of no. First, there's some indirect and foundational things for us to consider. One is, how frequently is our student requesting things appropriately? So if he's a very low rate mander, very low frequency of requesting things, excuse me, then we might not want to start saying no any more than absolutely necessary, right? We're not going to go play on the swings in the rain. So that's the real world just gave us a no. But maybe I'm saying yes to another Cheeto because you don't ask for things often enough. And I want you to first get more inclined to ask for things more often. I want you to understand the power of your communication more. That's not a golden rule, it's just a suggestion. And then another question we have to check on is, does this student already tolerate delays? If a student doesn't tolerate delays, I would usually start with that instead of no, because it's usually easier. Why is it usually easier? When you say you want a Cheeto and I say no, that means at no time in the next several minutes are we going to be having a Cheeto, right? Because that's what no means. If I say wait, that could mean in the next 10 seconds you're having a Cheeto, right? So the reinforcer for good waiting is getting what you asked for. And the reinforcer for tolerance of no is still not getting what you asked for. That's what makes it harder. It's some other kind of, like, you're still a student in good standing. You're still allowed all these opportunities to engage in any variety of other things apart from this thing you asked for. Sorry, I'm fighting a cold if you couldn't tell. Offering another option. This is a popular thing for us to do. And it's a very reasonable thing to do. We can't go outside because it's raining, but you can play with the magnets or something. I know you usually like those. You can play with those if you like. I like this approach too. So I don't want to sound like I'm poo-pooing this approach. It works great for some learners and it's totally fair. For some learners though, they're too, loosely speaking, too peeved. They get too emotional about the no, the initial no, that they're not available, right? They're emotionally unavailable. You can't console me now. I'm too immediately mad. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're offering now just feels like you manipulating me more, right? Or it's I'm not loosely speaking, I'm not processing what you're trying to sell here, because I'm just too peeved. In that case, giving the offer for the other thing is at the very best a waste of time. And there's some ways that it can actually be sort of harmful in that case, such as by making the contingency is the best word for it, by making it ambiguous that you're upset, our students upset with us, and we're still trying to offer some positive attention to try to get them into something else, where that might be a better time for us to be clearer with them that this kind of upset behavior that means it's a good chance for you to kind of calm down, find something to focus on for a little bit, slow your roll a little bit. And when you've slowed your roll a little bit, then I'll be able to join back in and offer some other things for us to move back forward with some things. Anyway, if that nice basic option is not going to work for your learner, then other options should be considered. There's always other options to consider. I always think that these sorts of challenges are solvable. It's just harder in some cases than it is in others. There's some indirect interventions for no, such as, this is one of the first things I usually think of actually, is playing the game hot or colder. When I play the game hot or colder with a student, I use the words yes and no because they're more functional instead of using hotter and colder. And the benefit is that no means a different thing in this context, right? This is especially useful for kids who've developed what I call a magical aversion to no. So it's like no Cheeto. Of course, you should be a little bit perturbed by that. You should maybe groan for a second about that. Everyone loves Cheetos. So yeah, fair enough. You're not getting a Cheeto. That means bad things. Be upset. But in the context of hot or colder, no means your Cheeto's not there. You should look somewhere else, right? Look somewhere else if you want to find, oh, yes, it's that way. So there's quick reinforcement for a student responding appropriately to hearing no, and it takes the emotion out of it. It helps through some experience, at least, to get the emotion out of it. So for those kids where no has become something that they sort of quickly upset or escalate in a variety of meanings of the word, then finding opportunities to expose them to the word that are favorable contexts is a great way to turn the tide the other direction. I also like playing the game red light, green light, which uses the words stop and go when I teach it, because those again are more functional than red light and green light, except for when we're talking about traffic somewhere down the road. But when I'm teaching red light, green light, it's the stop means essentially the same thing as no, right? Okay, come on. Oh, no, don't come anymore. Okay, come on. It kind of means the same thing as wait. It kind of means the same thing as no. We're nibbling around the edges of the spirit of no, right? But we're doing so in favorable circumstances. We're saying, if you did stop well, I'm going to be saying go again in a second. And it's sort of an easy thing. You're just walking quickly or running towards something you want, and then you're going to get it. So that's good. With some kids, especially those with a little more advanced verbal skills, I like joking about things being wrong. Again, we're nibbling around the edges of what it means, the spirit of no, right? The spirit of no, when we're talking about, no, an alligator doesn't ride a bike. Oh, no, that's wrong. I want my kid to laugh. I want no to be something that's like, yeah, it's just a word, right? And through enough of these activities, sometimes we will completely fix the challenge with the no. Each of these involves experiences with versions of no, just in more palatable and more favorable contexts. So some direct interventions for no. So these are ones where when we're taking it more head on. Basic outline of this is that we want to say no at least a few times an hour, right? So we want to make sure we're getting enough practice. Why I say at least a few times an hour, we don't want 5 times a minute. Like the whole world can't be no, right? But for teachers, and here I'm including aides and parents and cousins and anyone, gym coaches, for teachers who've seen this kid hit himself in the head when you say no about something, they're less inclined to say no, right? So they're probably looking for more chances to say yes, or maybe later, or we'll see, or things like that. They're kind of skirting the issue. And one of the things that happens with that is that our kid doesn't get enough opportunities to demonstrate tolerance of no, because it's not coming up as often, right? So he's getting very little practice with it, and therefore the problem behavior is maintaining. So when we say no, let's say for sake of argument, we're going to say it about twice an hour. No Cheeto, no, it's someone else's turn on the slide or something like that. Okay, if it helps and if it's possible, offer another option. That's great. So we're saying, okay, good, you took that no, but you were able to go this other direction. Great, off you go, doing great. If your student does tolerate no for at least a few seconds, reinforce. Yeah, we can have those magnets, or in some cases, we might establish a token economy. Great, here's a token for that. Or we might even have small treats available depending upon what works for our learner. And if they have struggles with no, it's not their turn on the computer or other things like that, but we have some raisinets available that we give them whenever they are calm for 3 seconds after they hear no. We say, wow, I love how calm you are, boom. That can turn no into an opportunity to get a raisinette. Now, here's the hard part, and some of this may require you to consult with a local BCBA or someone to help you manage if things get hairy, right? So if your student does not tolerate no, there's some things I want us not to do. I would advocate that we do not coax him to calm, that we do not change the no to a yes. Sorry, again, fighting a cold. That we do not change the no to a yes. What we, as behavior analysts, what we don't want to do is have problem behavior pay off for our kids, because if problem behavior pays off now, it will happen more in the future, right? So there might be some other things, some other tools that you and your team have chosen for calming opportunities. Here's a place to calm. Here's some presence activities to do, or we're going to withdraw our attention, give it to someone else for a while so you don't think there's attention coming for this. All of that needs to be individually tailored for your learner, depending upon how much they escalate, how frequently they escalate, what kinds of interventions have proven effective. So I can't give you specific advice on exactly what to do if they don't tolerate no, but I can advise that we do not want to coax him to calm, saying, oh, here, calm down, we have other good things now. And we don't want to change the answer from no to a yes. Okay, like I said, and there's the options that I've been talking about here are only some, right? There's still more. In my career, I've had plenty of challenging kids to where the first 8 ideas didn't work. So, okay, well, then you have to come up with a 9th idea, right? Need is the mother of invention. I always feel like there's a way around these things. There always is. It just sometimes takes more thought, analysis, and planning, or maybe staff training and determination on our part. One of the things that I've come up with for some kids who are tougher to teach tolerance of no to is scripted in the book, Teaching Good Learner Repertoires. And this is if we really need to dig deep into teaching the tolerance of no. There's a protocol I made called the No Okay protocol. And in this protocol, we first teach our kid to say okay, or sign okay, or use a device to hit okay, that's all right, through whatever means necessary. Here, say okay, okay, good. This prompt works for you. I do this, you say okay. Good, we have that warmed up. I've been reinforcing it. We just taught that, primed that response. Okay, so now I primed that response and I arranged some things that you're not really that interested in as the student. Here's a paper clip, there's a paper towel, here's some stuff. Okay, don't use the paper clip, don't touch the paper clip. Okay, oh, okay, great, nice job. Here's a raisinette. Or, okay, let's just stick with the raisinette example for now. Okay, no, you can't have the paper towel. I prompt this, student says, okay, great, here's another raisinette. So we're getting some really explicit, highly favorable practice on hearing the word no, that I'm not being shy about using the word no, but I'm being super generous about saying, no, you can't have neutral things you didn't care about in the first place, with an immediate prompt with generous reinforcement. Remember the dimensions grid we talked about several slides ago? That's relevant here because, again, what I just described is not mastery of tolerance of no, is it? That's a lot of support. So in the book, we go through another 4 or 5 phases after this that bring us down to, eventually we are talking about no coming after a kid has asked for something that he does want in that moment, and you're not getting a raisinette or something like it every time you tolerate no, and every time you say okay after hearing no. Tolerance of corrections. One of the first questions I have when we're talking about tolerance of corrections is, does your student consistently accept prompts? Why is this relevant? Because if you have to correct a response, say your student is doing math and 4 + 3, he puts down 8. Okay, well, that's an error. So if you were going to help him with that, you might guide him to erase it, or you might erase it for him. You might say, let's work it together, 4 and 3, let's count them all, let's make the dots, let's do some of that. If your student wouldn't have accepted those supports before an error, right? So you're teaching him the addition and you're using those supports proactively. If he's not tolerant of that, if he's impatient about it, or he wants to get on with it on his own, or he's just not interested in doing the math in the first place, then he's much less likely to tolerate the same support after having made an error. Because after you made an error, you've already invested some effort, haven't you? You've already tried to do it, and now that effort's not going to be reinforced. And now, at some level, loosely speaking, you feel bad about being judged as having performed incorrectly, and now a support is coming. So some students find that impalatable. In addition to, so if they didn't accept prompts, I wouldn't really even work on accepting corrections yet. I would just work on accepting prompts first. This also takes us back to the basic learner package, in that we have to wonder whether he's generally cooperative with work across the board. If not, if out of 300 or 400 opportunities to respond well in a day, he's only responding pretty well on 50 or 60 of those, then we should be working more on his tendency to cooperate well than we are on the specific challenge of accepting corrections. Okay, assuming that corrections cannot consistently be avoided. Okay, so if there's going to be some time that a correction is going to be relevant, and we can't just say, okay, we're not calling anything wrong, we're just going forward as though everything is right. Then some of the things we can consider are arranging a special token system for tolerance of corrections. So one of the tools, one of the angles that I use for kids that I've been able to establish token systems as effective for, where they really value the tokens, is the more narrowly I define the behaviors that earn the tokens, the more potent the effect on that behavior. So let me give some examples of that, because that's a lot in one sentence. If we said, oh, tokens are for, being good. Okay, so being good is being where you belong, and coming when called, and trying to answer pretty well, and saying nice things, and all these things, and finishing your jobs and all of that, then you're getting token for a number of things, and that is sort of nice in a broad way, and hopefully we're increasing a number of things and we don't even have to tightly define them. That's all lovely, but no one of those specific things is going to be particularly strengthened by the tokens, because the tokens are being, loosely speaking, sort of watered down. They're being dispersed amongst a wide variety of behaviors. right? Now, if you take those and you say, these are all for tolerance of a correction. So when I look at that and say, oops, let's erase, and I look at you and see that you're calm and you get a token, and I put it, ooh, you did a nice job with that correction. Now it's for that one particular thing. And I even have it written on your token strip. I was calm when the work was hard, for kids who can read well enough for that. That has a more robust effect on that particular behavior because it is narrowly focused on just the one. So sometimes that's a trick that I use. Reinforcing tolerance of corrections more generously than first-time correct responses. This is a hard way of thinking for some, right? Sometimes that's a good thing to do. So Timmy is fine doing mastered work. He's happy to do it. He'll do 15, 20, 30 responses in a row. We're reinforcing that in some kind of way. Probably not at that point. We're probably not reinforcing every single correct response, right? But we're, reinforcing every so often for correct responses or for task completion. So now if he makes a mistake, there's 20 math problems and he gets one of them wrong. We weren't giving a token or a raisonette or anything for every correct response, but we might give it for every incorrect response that he tolerates a correction for. See, so we have a contrast effect. We're set up that tolerance of correction is my goal, man. And I'm going to reinforce that more than if you were right in the first place. It's a hard way of thinking because we're used to reinforcing correct responding and not reinforcing incorrect responding, right? But it's about knowing your goal. In this case, the goal is not explicitly just be correct more often. The goal is, of course, at some point you're going to be incorrect. How do you handle it when you are? That's the goal. So we understand that as the goal. So we reinforce what we want. Something that works with a lot of kids is, okay, if there's an X on something or something is erased or someone says no or whatever, however the form of the correction looks like, there shouldn't be any personal pride, loosely speaking, tied up in it. No one said you did anything wrong. I'm saying I did something wrong. In fact, you get to say that I did something wrong. Oh, good for you. We get to turn the tables on this. That's a good day for you. Some kids, that's not enough because they're sort of rigid about things being wrong and it bothers them just having something wrong. But for a lot of kids, especially when we get into higher functioning or emotionally disturbed populations, having them correct our work is a tremendous benefit. When that happens, I like to model the good tolerance, of course, but not angelic tolerance. I'm not saying, oh, thank you for the lesson, kind sir, I appreciate it so much. I might say something like, oh, darn it. I thought I heard it. But I'm showing that you can express discontent at some way, and then you can move on. That's an appropriate kind of response. And I might, with some kids, make a point of making that my discontent just funny enough for them to kind of laugh about it. So I'm trying to take all that emotion out of it. This isn't something to be upset about. This is something we can have a little bit of fun with and move on with. Okay, overcoming fears or rigidities. And this I'm taking on a little bit quickly. There's a lot more resources available on this that we can get into. And I think I've moved quickly enough through the rest of this webinar that I can spend a little time on this slide. Overcoming fears and rigidities both benefit from exposure. Okay, remember I talked a few slides ago about the tolerance of no, and that one of the things that happens with, especially when behaviors are rather robust, like self-injury or physical aggression or property damage or something like that, especially when those protest kinds of responses are robust, teachers, parents, aides will have some tendency to avoid the conflict with the kid. They won't say no, or they won't clap near a kid if the kid doesn't like clapping, or they won't go near the nail clippers or things like that, or they won't show them a sloppily drawn R, right? A sloppily written R for a kid who requires a carefully, perfectly written R. So just having the chance to give our kids some exposure gives them the chance to overcome that challenge if we have the right kinds of supports. It's usually best for those exposures to be small, right? I'm not a big advocate for, okay, this is the thing that makes our kid erupt, so let's just kind of ring the bell. Let's set it up, they erupt, it doesn't work out. Okay, go back, set it up, they erupt, it doesn't work out. That's called bursting, or using an extinction burst. It has its place, but it's not a great starting place in most of our cases. In most of our cases, we can find smaller examples for surmountable challenges. I'll take a little bit of an example of this, taking the example of nail clipping. We can look at this as an opportunity for systematic desensitization. So I'm hearing that your parents hold you down in order to clip your nails. And your nails usually look like Count Dracula because they only do this, you know, every 5 to 6 weeks. They hold you down to do it, or they try to clip your nails in your sleep. All right, so you're not getting the exposure. And when you have the exposure, it's the whole enchilada, right? It's the whole big thing, which makes it worse because you're not in practice. And when you are in practice, it's terrible, it's awful. So you're not surmounting it, right? We're just surviving it because our goal, the narrow-sighted goal of the people holding the kids down is we need the nails clipped. But the better goal, the more thoughtful goal, is we need our kid to calmly go along with getting his nails clipped. Okay. So getting back to systematic desensitization, there's no reason I need to clip all of your nails all the way in one sitting. I don't even have to clip it at all in one sitting. I can just have the nail clipper this close to your nail and see that you're pretty calm about it, say, great, that's a great job being calm, and then I can pull it away. With things like phobias, we can say nail clipping is a common enough one, haircuts is a fairly common one, where our kids just have a sincere fear of that event. With those, I usually use what is another thing that I've devised that's called a calm count. And there are a lot of resources available for this. If you want to look into Relias Learning Academy, there's a lot described in the book that I showed earlier, Teaching Good Learning Repertoires. There's a free PowerPoint on our website, wholechildconsulting.com, on the use of calm counts. But the basics of a calm count are, we combine it with systematic desensitization. So I'm only putting the clippers this close, just enough to maybe make you a little bit anxious, but not overwhelmed with anxiety. And then when I see that you're relatively calm, I count for you. Oh, that's nice. Good. 1, 2, 3. I'm not racing. I'm not letting you push the speed of my counting. I'm just giving you a lot of feedback. You're doing really well. 1, 2. That's lovely. 3. Great. And when I get to 10, we're done. And at 10, I take the clippers away. You get your raisinette, or I put the clippers away for a good while, or I give you a token and I say, good, we have 2 more we're going to do. You know, we have 2 tokens left to get for our calm counts. You're learning here that you're not getting clipped every time, that you get to have the clippers go away based upon you being calm, right? So that makes a lot of good progress. The other thing that I do is this is a contingency, meaning it's not, you get this if you do this and you get this if you don't do it. It's you get this if you do it and you don't get that if you don't do it. All right, so I count calmly and pleasantly for you at a relaxed pace if you're calm. And then for those little times that I see little bits of anxiety, the pulling back, pursing the lips, shallow breathing, raised eyebrows, a whine, pulling your hand, at those times, I pause counting. I say, ooh, that's not calm. And my fingers are still up. I'm paused on 3 here. Okay, that's not calm right now. And then I wait for my student to come down part of the way. So maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, they went from a 2 to a 4 or a 5. I wait for them to come back down to a 3 or so. Oh, good. That's calmer. I come back and I give the attention again. It's this alternating. I'm helping give feedback that you're calm. I'm pulling back a little bit when you're not calm, so that you have the chance to learn to calm yourself for that moment. And the moment you start calming yourself, I'm back saying that's a good job calming yourself. There's a lot more to that. That's actually usually a 2-hour presentation that I do. but that can give you an idea for getting started. And I was pretty sure I was getting ahead of myself on this one. This is the calm counts are an example of a timely support. Let me just get a little bit more into what I mean by the timely support. Timely supports, broadly speaking, are shaping. They are helping students who are helping themselves. So a student who is almost capable of tying his shoe or getting a knot out of a shoelace or something like that, when he's completely given up on the prospect of it, that's not a great time for us to step in and do it for him, because we're reinforcing quitting on his part, right? We don't want it. We want trying. We want more effort. So the great time, the timely support would be, he's there working to try to tie his shoe. Great. Now I'm going to help you tie your shoe as much as I need to, because the help comes when you're helping yourself. Okay. Calm counts are the same thing. I use that same sort of strategy across a lot of different target repertoires. So in the calm counts, I'm helping provide all the feedback and modeling the calm and all that while you're trying, while you're pretty calm. And I love that you're pretty calm, and we're going to get through this together. But then I don't do what most people would naturally be inclined to do, is to increase my supports when you're not trying as much, right? When, just like the tying the shoe. Escalating is an opportunity for our kid to feel the escalation, note the lack of support that we're giving for that moment, and do something to try to get our support back, right? It's an opportunity for that. But if we come in and we help more while they're escalating, we might just be reinforcing escalation, right? We might just be, we're not exercising the muscle of self-calming. We're instead making them remain dependent upon us. Thank you again to CARD. Thank you everyone for participating in this webinar. To obtain a certificate of completion, you must fill out the form at the certificate of completion link provided on the email for this training. Please write down this code, as it will be required to receive the certificate. WAR 212021. The code is WAR 212021. In summary, we all dislike some things, and we're not expecting everyone to be just Zen all the time. With some of our students, these dislikes can really undermine instruction though. And they do therefore warrant some intervention, some consideration on our part. We can address these indirectly, right? By remembering some of those broad parts of the basic learner package. Do we overall have good cooperation? Is our kid overall agreeable with us, pretty flexible? Are we continuing to expand our kids' interests? Are they enjoying some things better with us than without us? Do they appreciate our attention? Are they accepting our assistance? That basic learner package basically cures a lot of ills, right? That does a lot of work for us. As necessary, it's sometimes helpful for us to isolate one of these sore spots, to find an issue like tolerance of no, or like tolerance of nail clipping as an example, and address that dislike directly. If we do that well, right, if we think it through well using those dimensions grids, planning for the challenges to be surmountable, planning for the supports to be sufficient for our student to succeed with those surmountable challenges, planning for that to work out for our kids, that if you go along with this, you overcome this challenge. I don't just immediately follow it up with a bigger challenge, which might unwittingly punish your success, but instead it's like, great, you surmounted that challenge, lovely. Here's a way that works out for you. Here, we're going to change directions now and do something else, or that's just going to work out. So thank you again, everyone, for your time. Please contact FAU CARD at 561-297-2055, card@fau.edu, www.autism.fau.edu. Thank you.